Quote number 1, "This is the price paid for a calm spirit. This is the price for peace of mind. Nothing is got without a price. You will be unjust, therefore, and insatiable, if, while refusing to pay the price for which such things are bought, you want to obtain them for nothing." When we get married, we sign up for a lifetime. We tell each other, I want to be with you for the rest of our natural born lives together. And when we sign up for that commitment, what happens to us in our marriage is what we signed up for. In a really real sense, even the hardest trials and tribulations and hardships and whatever happens to the two of you, you guys signed up for that. And you can absolutely improve the state of your marriage. Any couple can. I firmly believe that with commitment from both spouses, the marriage can radically change. But with the commitment of a lifetime to each other, made up of two flawed people, all of those trials, that's part of the deal. That's part of what we asked for when we got married. And I know that sounds really radical, but even if to some degree we still have this internal fight going on of, this isn't what I expected marriage to be like. This isn't what I signed up for. This isn't what I wanted. I wanted something else. If we can challenge that thought by saying, okay, when I first got married, it's a good chance I didn't know what marriage actually entailed. I expected it to be one way, and it's now been this other way. And so when I signed up for this, maybe I didn't know exactly what the future held. I was not fully informed, but no one ever is. And just because your expectations haven't been met doesn't mean that what you're getting isn't at sometimes even required when it comes to a marriage between two flawed people. Instead of blaming the marriage, instead of blaming our spouse, embracing the fact that maybe this is just part of it. Maybe this is part of what it means to be married for decades and decades to the same person without ever taking a break. And the people who don't get married, the people who get divorced, they don't get lifelong marriage because they didn't pay the price. They weren't willing to pay the price. And so if you are right now really struggling, but you want to save your relationship and you're hopeful that your spouse does too, embracing this idea that we are paying the price right now. We are paying to have a lifelong marriage together as long as we're both alive. And this is just part of that payment. You can't get the steak at a nice restaurant if you won't pay for it. You can get a less expensive dish or just an appetizer or something, and that's what some people do. But if you want the steak, if you want the lifelong marriage, it's a bigger price to pay. And for a lot of people, I think when we realize that that price is just inherent in marriage, it's just part of what it means to be married, that we have to sacrifice our free time, and we probably lose some sleep, particularly when we become parents. And sometimes we're really stressed, and sometimes we fight a lot, and sometimes, there's going to be tears and disappointments and really difficult experiences. But that is part of the package. Once we can accept that, we can stop thinking, okay, there's something wrong with my relationship because we're having these struggles. No, it's not that your relationship is wrong. It's that it's forever. It's that it's hard to be married forever. That's just part of it. And so taking away some of that judgment that, why am I struggling so much? Why are me and my spouse having so many problems? Taking away some judgment from you and the relationship and your spouse, and realizing that it's normal, that this is part of the price you have to pay for a lifelong love. Quote number 2, "He keeps guard against himself as though he were his own enemy lying in wait." I think this is a really good thought experiment. Asking yourself the question, what if you were your marriage's worst enemy and it wasn't your spouse, and it wasn't, what you're going through with your kids, or it wasn't the illness or the job loss or the infidelity or whatever else is out there that is impacting your relationship? What if you were the worst enemy of your marriage? That's not saying that you are. If you're watching this video, chances are you are really fighting hard to save the relationship and to contribute positively to it. However, adopting a mindset that you might actually be sabotaging your own efforts in some way, or your spouse's efforts, sabotaging the relationship in some way that you don't know because you haven't thought about it, that's a really valuable exercise because it helps you narrow down into the things that you can actually change on your own without buy-in from anyone else, without chance, without good fortune, without fate, without anything being on your side except for you. What are the things that you might be doing that you could change, that could transform the relationship right now without relying on anything else to get started? Quote number 3, it is not the things themselves that disturb men, but their judgments about these things. This is, in a lot of ways, kind of the crux of a lot of Stoic teachings, and that is that you control your life, the quality of your life, and its outcomes by controlling how you respond to your environment. So giving up trying to control your spouse, giving up trying to control what happens to you, and instead focus on controlling what you do about it. It's growing up, I heard a lot, it's not what happens to you in life, it's how you take it. It's the same sort of idea. This idea stands the test of time because it's true for every human that's ever walked this earth, that how happy you are, how content, how peaceful, how much love you feel, that all has so much more to do with how you interpret what's happening in your life versus what actually is happening. So for example, in your marriage, if your spouse yells at you, if you got home a little bit late and your spouse is annoyed because you guys had a dinner planned, and instead of reacting to your spouse in a frustrated way and getting angry back and escalating the fight, that's only going to make it worse. That's only going to make the reality of that night a lot worse. If you then say instead, I'm sorry, I messed up, I want to go out with you anyway, this is a fun date night, I've really been looking forward to this, I love you so much, and I'm gonna work on this. I'm going to try to get home on time as much as possible in the future, and if I mess up, please forgive me because I'm not perfect, but I promise I'm working on it. That just fundamentally changes the entire situation. And the only thing that was different was what you did. It didn't have anything to do with your spouse. Your spouse is the exact same in both scenarios. The only difference is how you responded to it. Quote number 4, do not seek to have everything that happens happen as you wish, but wish for everything to happen as it actually does happen, and your life will be serene. This has been a really big one for me recently because I've started to notice that as I stretch out the timeline of the effects of a situation, oftentimes they turn out to be very different than I thought they were going to be. And what I mean by that is if something bad happens to me or something that I think is bad, for example, let's say the other day I missed my flight. This actually happened. We showed up 1 minute late to the airport and they wouldn't let us board. And I was not happy about it. If I had just expanded my timeline to a day later, that was an extra day that I got to see my family. And that ended up being a really special day for all of us. So in the moment, if I had said, okay, I don't actually know if this is going to turn out good or bad. I don't know if the consequences of this moment are going to be good or bad in the future because I haven't seen it yet. So if we can embrace not knowing really if a situation is good or bad that happens to us, then we can be a lot more at peace with what happens rather than being, tossed around by what happens to us in our life and be in a good mood or a bad mood depending on how we're perceiving situations. Instead, if we can say, actually, I'm going to do the best I can. I'm going to be the best person I can be. I'm going to treat people well. I'm going to work hard, whatever it is. And then what happens, that's what I want to happen. And it sounds odd, especially when you get into the bigger issues, like if your child gets sick or your spouse gets sick or you get in an accident or you lose your job or whatever it is. In those moments, it can be really hard to think, well, why would I actually want this to happen? But we never know what's going to happen in the future as a result of those situations. And even if we didn't want that to happen, even if we didn't want to lose our job or we didn't want our loved one to get sick, we have no idea the outcomes. And we can't control that situation anyway. And so shifting away from judgment of the situation towards an embrace of what's going on in our lives, that's how you achieve peace. Quote number 5, lay down for yourself at the outset a certain stamp and type of character for yourself, which you are to maintain whether you are by yourself or are meeting with people. How are you going to act? How are you going to think and speak no matter what your spouse does? This is so big that what your spouse does, how your spouse behaves, should not determine how well you treat your spouse. It shouldn't determine if you do things out of love, if you do things for the good of your spouse, if you're honest, if you're reliable, if you are kind. You should be all of those things, even if your spouse is not being those things. That's real love, but that's also real internal power, because it says that I don't have to be tossed around by the tides of other people's moods. I don't have to ride the roller coaster with my spouse. I love my spouse. I will be empathetic and I will try to help when my spouse is struggling with something, but that doesn't mean that you stoop to the lows of how your spouse acts. It doesn't mean that you only behave well when your spouse is behaving well. There's no freedom in that. That is literally being chained to someone else's behavior to dictate your life. And tying into that is the next quote, quote number 6, whoever therefore wants to be free, let him neither wish for anything nor avoid anything that is under the control of others, or else he is necessarily a slave. You can be invincible if you never enter a contest in which victory is not under your control. So your goals and the things you focus on should only be things that you can actually control the outcome of. So, for example, if your goal is to stop fighting with your spouse, well, you don't have total control over that because your spouse has to also be bought into that. But if your goal is to never raise your voice with your spouse, never express anything out of anger or frustration, to stay calm, those are things you can control. And chances are, if you do that over and over again in every fight you guys have, you're probably going to fight a lot less, because it takes two people to have a blowout disagreement. If you refuse to rise to the anger levels of your spouse, then there's no fight there. Your spouse is left fighting herself or fighting himself, and you're making the relationship better purely by controlling what you can actually control. That makes you invincible, because no one else can knock you off of your game of maintaining your peace and maintaining control of yourself. And lastly, quote number 7, now is the contest, and here before you are the Olympic Games, and that it is impossible to delay any longer, and this it depends on a single day and a single action whether progress is lost or saved. There's no better time to improve your relationship than right now. You're watching this video, it means that you want something to change. So take seriously your relationship, take seriously the situation you're in, take seriously your own ability to actually make a difference. You know, you are so capable of changing the situation simply by shifting your focus from things that are outside of your control to things that are within your control, from shifting your goals to character traits you want to develop rather than outcomes that you want that rely on other people. You can become a phenomenal spouse, independent of the person you're married to. And chances are, if you do that, the person you're married to is also going to change in ways that you maybe never expected. Okay, guys, I hope that video was useful. Please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel for all things related to building a lifelong marriage. And just a reminder to share this video with anyone who you think could really benefit from its message. It really helps the channel grow and lets me know the sort of content you guys want to see. I'm Cameron, and this is Modern Marriage.